All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for finding the time in your busy schedules to join us today. Today, we're going to have a conversation, the presentation about humans in the loop when using these AI systems. This is part two. There are two case studies that I want to get to. One is a general case study regarding using AI systems and human oversight in legal firms. And another I'd like to get to is one we may actually have a little bit of a question and answer with the guest we have today, Ryan Miller. All right, so without further ado, again, thank you for joining us for this presentation. This presentation is brought to you by Cognify Solutions. Cognify Solutions is a brand part of Nexus Systems Incorporated that is focused on AI governance, ensuring that the AI systems that we are designing, developing, deploying, and using out there are being used with intentionality and in tandem with human agency and not as a replacement for it. Our agenda today is to go through this presentation to hopefully give you some reasonable, actionable insights and to be able to actually share some insights with one another members of our community and hope to give you something actionable to be able to consider and take back and use. So as I touched on before, ultimately one of our core purposes here is to ensure that the information we're giving you is something that's useful, something that answers some questions, something that helps illuminate. And as such, if there's any question you have about the content or subjects that we present, we encourage you to put questions in the chat, to join our community, to follow up with us, and perhaps have an exploratory conversation to see how we can make some of these guidelines, some of these recommendations, some of this governance real for you. All right, without further ado, we're going to jump to this presentation. All right, give me one moment. Let me switch my screen out. All right. Now, just as a little bit of context, if you guys can just leave a note in chat, feel free to leave a little bit of introduction, your name, your company, and drop a quick question you may have about AI governance or what human in the loop means for you and your environment. Like I said, one of the first case studies we'll go over briefly is in the legal space, but all of this transcends beyond that. Excellent. And for what it's worth, a quick shout out to Zenith Project. Those folks might know what they're doing and making something really unique in that sales space. I'd like to shout out folks we're working with and our partners. Definitely check that out right there. That is, in fact, let me shout out the URL, zenithproject.co, zenithproject.co. So if you're catching this on the replay, there you go. Let's continue. All right. AI and humans, part two, human in the loop case study. Transforming principles into practice with measurable guardrails and defensible oversight. All right. Why human in the loop, HITL, and why now? Unsupervised automation erodes trust and creates asymmetric risk, while supervised automation compounds human capacity and creates defensible value. This is one of our core principles here, that as you add governance, as you add oversight in an AI system, you're ultimately not just ticking a governance box, that the value that you're adding to this system, the process that you're putting into these AI systems that you're developing or deploying gives you a strategic edge, gives you a competitive edge over somebody who is deploying an unsupervised, purely automated system. All right. Human in the loop is not review when convenient. It's the explicit assignment of decision rights, override authority, and monitoring obligations across the AI lifecycle. Good business cases here are fewer costly errors. AI is not perfect. If we're fallible, the tools we make also will be. So you may very well have a human be able to say, hey, that doesn't quite look right, and keep an automated system from taking that one small error and compounding it far faster than any human possibly could. Faster cycle times, because again, maybe this oversight period can ultimately lead to a more efficient system. All right. And auditable governance, ensuring that the governance systems that you have in place, you're able to give an account for. You're able to say, this is our policies, these are our procedures. This can be double checked. All right. Case study we'll look at. This is a hypothetical case study. In this scenario, a 45 attorney plaintiff side firm receives 2,500 inbound emails and scanned documents per weekday. That's a heavy load. All right. A easy solution to implement there might be a LLM assistant that proposes classifications, extracts entities and deadlines, drafts replies when safe, and flags sensitive items. In this scenario, a lot of folks may be inclined, a lot of firms, a lot of companies may be inclined to leave the AI system there. And it's important that's not where you just leave it. One of the reasons why you point at law firms generally is because they have a very specific and very clear need for oversight. And a lot of firms, if you happen to fail the human oversight test, that might be reputational risk, that might be some liability exposure. In law, that's a very high bar. That if you're a partner at a firm and you start putting out filing documents with errors in them, you may be exposed to personal liability and hefty fines. So, key triggers in a workflow like that. If they're low confidence outputs, so it's also key to make sure that the AI systems you're potentially deploying have confidence triggers attached to them, confidence values attached to them. Deadline bearing language. If anything says that something is supposed to be done at XYZ time, it's going to be a really good idea to have a human double check that deadline. One, make sure it was consumed and actually read into the system correctly, and also ensure that any other operations in your firm can also be synced up with that particular deadline, such as contract drafting proposals, document production proposals, witness production requirements, things like that. Whether or not there's any protected class or medical/personally identifiable informational content. Again, things that need to be flagged and made sure that they're not accidentally sent to a party that shouldn't have that. It's definitely been a scenario in the past where one firm, and this may even be with human oversight, so it's good to have this hybrid, where one firm may have, oh, excuse me, one firm may have content that was supposed to be flagged as sensitive and attorney work product. They may accidentally send it over to opposing counsel for discovery. This has happened. And it's also happened where AI has flagged that as to be shared accidentally, and it absolutely should be either retained or redacted. And novel templates during the burn-in period. It's important that while you're still implementing and making sure the system is well integrated in, that you have certain templatable information in place to test this. All right. Great success metrics and scenarios like this include a reduction in time to clear a case, a reduction in deadlines that are missed, and evidence that is captured for management review. Because ultimately, one of the things that's really important here is that any particular in this legal space, any particular evidence that needs to be shared or examined or cross-examined is ultimately produced for counsel to be able to evaluate and know for a fact whether or not that's something they can share. All right. 3 oversight gates. Great places to go and insert a human to review, to put your human in this automation loop. Where there's a critical risk, where deadline language, PII-rich content, protected class, where there's mandatory or thorough review, especially if there's any paperwork that attorneys may need to personally sign, and ensuring that really during that first implementation period, it's critical to make sure that the humans overseeing as much as possible. Implementing these systems blind can be an issue, especially if you were to implement them and say this is client facing, which is going to be probably the case in more scenarios where more non-legal scenarios where this is explicitly client facing and you do a brief burning period and you just let it off the rails. That's not necessarily great. You may find that your customer satisfaction, and in this case accuracy, may actually be a lot lower than you expect. So it's in short, it's important just the way, same way you have a probationary period for a new human agent, that you have a probationary period for your AI. Anywhere where the AI has low confidence, where there may be proposals below a certain threshold of confidence for that particular model you have implemented, and that should allow you to be able to say, hey, we really need a human decision on this. The AI agent should really be able to say, let's bring a human in here and confirm or deny this particular decision. And it also capture that reason. So whatever model may be implemented, you may want to make sure that's part of that auditability, that traceability in the governance of that system, that that is captured as it's referred to a potential human. And also generally for sampling, it's important to spot check the throughput of this system. If you happen to skip some of these gates, hopefully sampling is one of the last, and one of the things you should be doing regularly, but hopefully it's one of the last quality gates before you realize that, hey, this is really underperforming, that you're able to do spot checks throughout the operational life of the system and be able to say, hey, even though the AI flagged this as safe and thought it could send this out without any human oversight, that there's still a sample that was flagged, a sample that was checked by a human to be able to say, hey, this decision makes sense. This rationale makes sense. This chain of thought makes sense. If a human agent was sitting next to this automated agent, that it would have made a substantially similar or an identical call here. And as you go through this, it's important that this is measured quantitatively and documented accurately and consistently. This is actually part of the governance loop. This is what quality control in a human in the loop AI system, AI management system looks like. We want to make sure that how and when we're overriding that and when the stop of the line authority is preserved within human hands. Because again, when AI makes a mistake, and it can, we turn things over to automation because we want that to be high accuracy, we want it to be high efficiency. It can do so much more than humans can. Sure, fantastic, great. But if something goes wrong, it can go wrong really fast, really quick, really large. So if you want to make sure that someone can actually pump the brakes on that, push the button, pull something offline if that may be the case. And that is an authority that should be documented inside of your system. All right. For viewer experience and authority, it's important that we're pairing, again, human agents with the oversight of these systems. Reviewers are going to see what the AI wanted to propose, how the AI came to that decision, evidence of that the AI's rationale, and that outcome. Be able to say, hey, is this acceptable? Does this need to be edited? Does this need to be reclassified? Or do we really need to pull this out and handle this entirely offline? Some overall requirements are, say, recent codes for rejection, justification for high risk accepts, and formatting confirmation for ambiguous states, just to name a few. All right, let's go back. Here we go. Some great metrics that we might recommend in a scenario like this, as we've run through these numbers, to suggest that these help you actually have some actionable rationale in how you're implementing this system. Okay. So how often are reviewers agreeing with the decision the model makes? That really should be no lower than 70 to 85% of the time. Now, humans may not agree all the time. That may not reach 100%. But if humans aren't agreeing with decisions that that model makes, at least, I'd say 75, but at least 70 to 75 to 80 95% of the time, then something's wrong. That may indicate a signal that your model is misaligned. Actually, a really great signal that you may not have great oversight and governance in place is if you don't have a way of tracking that to begin with. That's usually a big red flag that, hey, maybe we need to consider our governance posture. Again, time to clear 20 to 30%. So we want to make sure that the AI is producing actual measurement SLA improvement. Now, for a law firm, this is how the time it takes to clear a case, that this is actual billable hours back. This is actual less time spent on these particular matters. In your industry, this may be time to manufacturing, time to finish product and manufacturing. This may be time to a closed case, time to resolution in customer service, or some figure like that's going to help you help give you an indication that this is value, this is time that this system is giving back. And deadline miss reduction. Are there actual deadlines that you're not missing anymore, that you're actually able to meet? Again, in the legal space, those can be hard court judge imposed deadlines that if you miss them, there aren't any do-overs. And if there are, they may be very expensive and not an avenue you really want to retread often. All right. All right. Next slide. Incidents, rollback, and communications. One of the issues that definitely will arise here, which is one of the reasons why we lead to having strong human in the loop controls, is that when there are issues, and there certainly can be, that if a human is already in the loop that is participating in the incident response of this, then this isn't going to be something you only learn about long after the fact. So, such as detection, identifying systemic errors, such as dates that may be misread, containing potential issues that the AI system may be generating, freezing automations, raising the amount of that you're sampling, turning certain automation features on or off, ensuring that these actions and risks are communicated to all the appropriate stakeholders, notify affected users with standard incident response, notifying affected users with scope, workarounds, times to resolution, and ultimately giving a resolution. How do we fix this process? How do we correct this data? How do we modify the model in order to remedy and reconcile the issues that were just raised? And ultimately documenting this. It's important that this is a bit of an incident response loop here, that after such an incident occurs, any type of deviation in the system occurs, that is documented, an action plan put in place, and you figure out what the best way forward is. That may be adding slightly less automation. That may be upskilling your reviewers. That may be adjusting what what your expectations are, or what your stakeholders' expectations are. All right, so say minimum set of artifacts that we would recommend you do, and you can definitely engage in us to help walk through with you. A Adding a AI policy, addendum to your AI policy. So if you happen to have a AI policy in place, fantastic. Consider adding a draft of that implements meaningful human control. What are some human in the loop HITL triggers? What are some sampling rates that you can add to ensure that there's some human oversight? What might be some red flags that you didn't consider before, but the AI might definitely not consider if you don't put them in? All right. I won't go through all these right now. Just encourage you to go ahead and see if any of this makes sense, especially that verification and validation plan. If any of these things make sense to you, please go ahead and reach out to us. All right. In the interest of time, let's see. Actually, I will mention this briefly. One of the things that we hang our hat on is ISO IEC 42001. And this is a great standard. It's an ISO standard specifying how AI management systems are to be implemented. And it is an excellent base framework for your AI management governance. All right. And these are some of the things that the standards and controls inside of that framework match up to some of our recommendations. Again, if you have questions on this, we'd love to have a further conversation with you. Okay. All right. Now, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and actually introduce Ryan of Zenith Project. Because as we sit here and we have a conversation about human in the loop, it's important to understand that, again, having a human in your system is not necessarily a bad thing. Indeed, with the types of outcomes that we have that we are expecting these days, and to be realistic, the way some of these models are positioned, the best possible outcome may not be just a 100% automated solution. It might be a hybrid. Again, Ryan, thank you for coming on and joining us today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Zenith Project and just a recap of what an AI and human hybrid system looks like for you and your organization today?
Absolutely. I'll tell you guys a little bit about what we're doing to keep a human in the loop of our AI service, and I'm happy to talk to you guys about it. But I don't really want this to be a pitch, so I'll more talk about it. I'll just pull back the curtain and tell you exactly what we developed and what we're doing. Zenith Project is automated AI outreach on LinkedIn. When ChatGPT first came out, I started thinking to myself, I think I can automate outreach on LinkedIn because my background's in sales. I've done a lot of cold outreach. I started building Zenith Project to automate that. And I very quickly realized once I got my first client or two and I was trying to use the AI messages, I just thought to myself, this is not going to go over well. All of these messages seem like AI. They don't have the human polish, they don't have the human feel. And so I started modifying my purpose for Zenith Project to allow me to add a human in the loop. So that means human oversight for every single message that got generated. And then an approval process where there was a vetting, some of those things Chris touched on, some of the sampling, but every single message needed that. They were all that very first check that he had on that check screen. It's like the critical check. Every single message we send out on behalf of our clients could make or break their relationship with a potential client, with a
That's critical
prospect.
risk.
So critical risk, exactly. And we had to build a system around the AI in order to allow for that approval process. Now, fast forward to now, we have the only AI outreach automation system that is scalable and hyper personalized and AI driven, but indistinguishable from human outreach. I built a team of dedicated copywriters. They're all in the Philippines and they have phenomenal English. A lot of them are English teachers, actually. And the AI still does 80% of the heavy lifting. That is why we have been so successful at scaling this outreach strategy, at getting such high conversions, because AI is doing the hard part from the human perspective, which is researching the person, customizing messages to their profile, developing and evolving the strategy throughout the conversation, what the current objective is through the conversation actually evolves in our system. And then the hard part for the AI, we just have really cheap VAs in the Philippines do, which is read it and make sure it sounds like a human wrote it. And I have come more and more to the belief that unless you would have your 10-year-old nephew doing a task for you, AI cannot be fully automated. That is the opinion that I have come to. And Chris might disagree with all of his checks. He might be able to put a system together that
No,
could
you're
automate something like that. But as Zenith Project, we are never going to be like I always have people ask me, oh, when AI develops a little bit more, will you actually replace your humans with more AI agents? And I don't think so. I honestly don't think that we're getting to the point anytime soon that AI will be able to do those critical tasks alone. And I also think that the sooner that you implement systems that allows for those hypercritical task reviews, you will be in a position to succeed for the next 5 to 10 years, I believe. So
That makes a
that's a
lot of
high level
sense.
overview.
No, that's perfect. That's wonderful. One of the beautiful things I think about how you're implementing that, and you put a fantastic bow on that, is that it's hybrid all the way for you. And honestly, I think that makes a lot of sense. Where we're coming from, we'll give good guidance on how to implement a purely or a mostly automated system as long as you implement reasonable controls and you have a meaningful human oversight. We'll give you good guidance and there are ways to align that. But for real success, I think you have it right that a hybrid solution is really where it's at where, and it's interesting, this may be a conversation we have in another webinar where even in the customer service space, perhaps especially in that customer service space, where you're pairing human agents with automated agents. And it's important that in that environment, they're actually working together. And that is where you're going to really have the acceleration of human potential, the acceleration of customer satisfaction, the acceleration of efficiencies, and not just replace one inefficiency with another, not just replace one liability with another. That hybrid is going to be where that's meaningful. No, that makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah, if I can add something, I honestly
Please.
don't think that AI, it's been a big question. I'm sure all of you have heard that question. Will AI take our jobs? I don't think AI will take all of the jobs and it won't replace any jobs in your company, but cyborgs will. And we're all cyborgs with cell phones. So if you have a smartphone, you're a cyborg. You can't live without it. You can't be detached from it. It just
Indeed.
happens to be technically detached from your body, but you live through your cell phone. AI has been a cyborg power up, and true AI cyborgs, meaning humans that are very capable at leveraging the AI, those will replace a larger
Indeed.
number of people. Like each of my
Mm.
copywriters are probably about 5x as efficient as a single person that would have to develop every message on their own and do that research, maybe 10x. So I have 10x less employees because I have this AI system built around them.
No, that makes sense. That augmentation, that's really what makes one a cyborg, that automated augmentation. And that augmentation is where you're going to see that acceleration. Absolutely. If I may ask, just circling back to the governance piece, how have you found the importance of adding some meaningful, documented, intentional controls in your journey? Was that something that you realized, like, hey, let's go ahead and drop a solid governance framework from day one? Or was this something that kind of happened organically that you realized, hey, one, I need this hybrid solution. All right, we're implementing this. And two, wait, let's go back and make sure that we're adding good process for this. And there's no wrong answer here. Not putting you on too much of a spot.
No, I love that question. And the best way to answer the question is to first describe some event that happened when we didn't have the governance in place, which is that I hired a bunch of new copywriters and I didn't give them much vetting. There was no SOP, there was no training process. And I'll give you the spoiler, which is that I've basically built the governance process into my employees' process when they're editing messages. So they are the final check and balance. And when I didn't have that baked into them, and especially when I had some bad hires that weren't capable of performing that governance task, they were sending messages out that they were sending out messages with brackets that said your name here,
Oh
that type
no.
of thing. It was, and that's horribly embarrassing for my clients, for us. I had to give out a bunch of credits because I'm like, I have to give my clients something to make up for that embarrassing situation where I got them in because now their prospect thinks, oh wow, I thought I was talking to you, but turns out I'm talking to an AI and not even a good AI, some bad automation system that couldn't
Mhm.
check it. So then I also, after this happened, I fired those people. I hired better people. My team now is incredibly strong in that. And I hard coded like basically keyword catches for brackets. So even if a message is approved,
Mhm.
it has brackets, it will flag that and not send it. And basically, I can go back and use it as a learning moment for that employee. Like, hey, you have to pay closer attention. So we have built hard coded systems and soft coded governance solutions into my employee training.
Excellent. I think, again, like I said, there's no wrong answer there because I think that mirrors a lot of business owners' journey. And regardless of the size, truly, that you'll have a process in place and you'll be running through it. Something will happen, and then you start to say, all right, let's use this as a teachable moment. Let's use this as a learning moment. What policies, practices, procedures can we put in place to make sure this doesn't happen again going forward? So again, like I said, no wrong answer in there. That's very identifiable. That's very, very relevant to, I think, a lot of folks.
The
And when,
last thing I'll add to that is it was relatively a small loss. It was a slightly embarrassing location, but not location. It was a slightly embarrassing event. The more critical the event, though, the more work you want to do on the front end to make sure those governance situations are built in. I hadn't, we'd already done what we could, but also in my time in sales, I've had a lot of embarrassing events where I call people the wrong name or do something embarrassing, and you just count it as another rejection and move on. So we were
indeed,
able to
you're not
have that
alone, my
embarrassing
friend.
situation. Yes, we were able to grow from it because it was not a fatal error.
Yeah, excellent. And that's what's that old quote? It's not about how often you fall, it's about how often you get up. And I think good governance helps to give you ways to recognize where those cracks are and something to fall back on and cling to as you pull yourself back up again. Absolutely. All right. I want to take this time to answer a couple questions we have in chat. I see one here. If you could add one aspect of AI governance to every company in America, what would you add? I'll answer that first, and maybe you might have an opinion on that, Ryan. I'll let you answer that. I would say one of the key aspects of governance is particularly AI governance is that validation process. Because I think we trust in our black box pretty heavily and very often. And sometimes we need to be able to go back and say, hey, let's actually take a moment to double check this. Let's take a moment to double check that source. Let's make sure that text isn't hallucinated. In the law example, let's make sure that we make sure the cases cited exist before we go to court with them because that keeps happening for some reason. And judges have been none too pleased. But if that's happening to lawyers in a court of law in that high stakes scenario, how much more often is that happening to the rest of all of us every day? So I would say, if anything, I'd say let's see if there's a way where everybody can be more intentional about validating what comes out of that AI black box. Did you have a take on that question?
My thing is that I think that more familiarity with AI in general, like general familiarity, do they use it often? That can go a long way towards governance because it gets you thinking about it gets you more versed in the places where governance is needed or things could go wrong without governance. I've talked to a lot of business owners, older business owners that have never used AI, and so they're not going to know where to start for governance unless they talk to Chris. Of course, Chris can help them out. But so familiarity with AI is something I would add to every company in America.
That's a very fair point. The amount of AI adoption, we've seen these rates are going up and up and up, but there's still a great many people who are either completely underutilizing it or not utilizing it at all. And that needs to be examined. To be fair and sure, there are some cases where you just don't need a lot of automation. but it's going to be important to understand the nature of this system in order to even begin to implement it. Absolutely. All right, I see another question here. How might AI governance benefit schools? I think that is an amazing question, a very critical one. And I think even that one piece of governance on validation of its output is really important. In fact, the one thing I might say, and I might be going off topic a little bit here, because it's not strictly speaking a governance and a standard governance control, but it's more of a technique and pattern of how we implement, how we interact with these systems. And that's encouraging interaction and these systems be built in a more Socratic way. Because when you look at certain systems like ChatGPT, they're very low interaction. You give them a prompt, it gives you an action, it tries to figure out everything, appeases you in one shot, and that's kind of it. If you have a conversation with it, it's still a, okay, this is the answer done. It doesn't really engage you in order to explore that topic, have a conversation, have that be a little bit more Socratic, and go to its proposed place with you. Now, in the way a lot of these systems are designed, that's desirable, that's valuable, right? But that doesn't really lead to a place where you can easily trust the output. That doesn't lead to a place where you can easily understand the output. It doesn't necessarily lead you to a place where you can really adopt a certain position or mindset or answer if ChatGPT is suddenly unavailable. And in the education space, I think that's actually probably very critical because that is actually part of fostering critical thinking. And if that dies in the education space, what hope do we have in the workplace for that critical thinking piece to be maintained? Hopefully, I'm not going too far off topic there. Ryan, did you have a thought about that?
No, I think that's so I hate the current education system. I think that it's already broken. I think that has always been a problem. I know in my generation, I only graduated from college 3 years ago, high school like 7 years ago. And most of my peers they weren't as smart as their grades claimed they were because they were copying answers and they were, even at the end of my college career, they were using AI. I know a lot of people are just taking the easy way out. And so I somewhat think that education is going to become more as a burden, not a burden, a responsibility of each individual person to take on themselves. So I think a lot of education will be about motivating learning and possibly have a lot better outcomes than the last 10, 15 years where it was easier than ever to get answers off of the internet. And the school system, part of my gripes about the school system is it's so rote. You sit down in straight lines and you learn the curriculum that is pre-approved, and there's no pursuing of interest. It's not education by interest, it's education by rote doctrine. And so I'm actually optimistic about the future of education because I think that it honestly can't get any worse than it already is. And so with AI, it can only get better with AI tutors, AI structured learning systems,
Yeah,
interest pursuing systems, etc.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And that is ultimately a very optimistic point. I'll grant you that. And indeed, I will use that to start to pivot to our close. All right.
Brittany has her hand up.
Oh, yes, Brittany, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. My camera's doing a thing. Anyway, Ryan, I found just as you were sharing, it was a super interesting. I'm a former educator, so anything that has to do with, I'll say it like this. One of the biggest habits I had to break from my middle schoolers was plagiarizing. And it's
Yes.
me because I, for me, that was not acceptable. But we
Yes.
went to school at a time where learning how to write and learning how to research was something you started doing quite early. So it was perplexing to me to see middle schoolers who struggle to write a paragraph. Now, obviously, yes,
Yeah.
I'm a teacher, but this was my first step into middle school. So there were a lot of things we really had to work hard to break habits on. Fortunately, I was able to transition with them from sixth to seventh grade, so I got to keep going with what we're working on. But I said all that to say that when you have, there's been big squabbles about using AI to do homework and things of that nature. Now, I'm not anti-AI at all, but I do think that sometimes we're getting to a space where students are losing critical skills like being able to write. And so when I was listening to you, the thing I thought about is, okay, so one of the big issues that I was hearing, I think this was last year, where a kid failed some big exam for him to graduate because they found out that he used AI to do the paper. My problem is that there are now platforms that are creating AI that sound like humans wrote it, which for your purposes makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And I started to wonder, how do you keep that out of the hands of students that then go home and use a computer? You know what I mean? Now, I've been doing
Yes.
this for a long time, so I can trip you up. All I got to do is take your paper and actually explain it to me. I'm going to know which one of y'all wrote it. But it's
Well,
one of those things that I really wonder, how do we, I share your grievance with the education system. How do we shake the dust off or move the blinders from people's eyes so that they're able to see the benefit of AI in the education space? And I think, to another point that you made earlier, and I think what Chris was answering your question, was like, we need to be aware of how to best use AI. Because in that space, then education and AI can work hand in hand and be a lot more effective. It doesn't have to take over a student's ability to think critically. If you teach them how to use, first of all, you have to teach teachers how to use it correctly so that they can then teach students, and then it becomes the tool it was designed to be. So this conversation for me was great. You did answer my question, but I definitely wanted to make sure to share my thoughts in a quiet space.
I love that. And if I can add one thing to that thought thread that you were building, is that we need a culture shift in education. I think that we're already moving away from the GED and the college diploma, the high school diploma. That is what you need to succeed in life. My generation, I'm 26. A lot of my fellow generation are saying, I got the degree and I can't find a job. I can't buy a house. I can barely put food on the table. And I don't even have a wife and kids. How am I supposed to survive? I think the credibility of the diplomas are going down, and we need a culture shift where back in the olden days, when there was a schoolhouse 10 miles away, you would walk to school every day, not to get the diploma from the school, but to get your education. Kids were actually seeking out education. They were looking for books to read. I think that there might be a culture shift where people stop thinking that school is as important and start seeking out education on their own with AI.
the ultimate democratization of education.
I think that's the direction that a lot of people are headed. I would hope that it is much more sweeping and happens a lot faster, because
I
to
agree.
your earlier point, AI is not going to take everybody's job. Who's going to take everybody's job is people that know how to use AI
Yes.
effectively.
Part,
Yes.
you know, that
I
is
think
an
the
amazing.
challenge, final thing, Chris, is that I think there will be a few winners in the space of packaging AI in a way that actually facilitates excitement and interest in learning. I think I haven't really heard of any big players in the AI education space, but I've actually started building myself a platform that you can load up mentors from throughout history. So you can choose Abraham Lincoln to be one of your mentors, and the AI will take on that persona. And then the idea is that you can also invite multiple mentors into a meeting with you. And so you talk about your problem, and then you get feedback from all of these mentors that's not anywhere close to be. It's like basically a proof of concept at this point, nothing close to marketability, but I'm interested to see where
Synthetic
education
symposium.
goes.
A
Yes,
synthetic,
synthetic
yeah,
symposium.
that's
That's
we love
amazing.
Yes, we will revisit this because there's another conversation we want to have in the, again, talking about AI governance in the education space. Ryan, might invite you back again.
That'd be fine. That'd really
Indeed.
good.
Any closing or parting thoughts?
No, I'd talk too much, but I'd love to hear Richard and Brittany's closing thoughts if they have any parting thoughts.
Um,
I will not ramble on. I will say this so as not to ramble on because I am a respecter of time. I love to get opportunity offline to sit and chat.
Absolutely.
well, I'll make sure if you are in our community, and Brittany, I believe you are, the ability to connect with our panelists and speakers is a feature of our community. Speaking of, if you are not yet part of this community, the Cognify Insight community, I encourage you, if you are live, to click the links in the chat. If you are joining us from the replay, to go ahead and look at the links in the description to be able to. Oh, oh, that's all right. If you are, let me start over. If you are live, please go ahead and look at the links in the chat. If you are not, you're joining us on the replay, please go ahead and look at the links in the description near this box, near this video, and join the Cognify Insight community. We firmly believe that the question of AI governance and how to implement these systems, how to steward these automated systems well, is a question and a conversation that needs to be dominated not by one voice, but by a community. And the Cognify Insight Network is our endeavor to build this community. So if you are not yet joined that, please follow those links and join that. If you have any other questions or if you wish to follow up and maybe have an exploratory conversation with us, please again find the link below. Email us, give us a call, check out our website, cognifysolutions.ai. Again, that's cognifysolutions.ai. Thank you so much for your time and for your attention. Have a wonderful day. Take care.